So, what is the most underrated aspect of each From Software Souls game? So, let's start with Demon Souls, and I'll keep it a buck. I'm not a big fan of Demon Souls, so I thought it would be very hard for me to pick an underrated category, but I actually came up on one pretty quick. So, my pick for Demon Souls would be the starting area. Now, I'm not a fan of Demon Souls, but Demon Souls has a top 3 starting area for me. I love the Gates of Boletaria. They have perfect enemy variety, an amazing atmosphere, and really nice level design that engages the player and gets them excited for what's next. Next up, we have Dark Souls 1, and honestly, this is a pretty boring pick I have for the most underrated aspect, but I think it's not talked about enough. And that's the consistency of Artorias of the Abyss. Artorias of the Abyss, even 13 years later, is still the most consistent FromSoft DLC ever. Now, it's not my favorite DLC, not by a long shot, but it's the only DLC where there isn't a section that I dread going through and I enjoy the whole thing consistently. Next, we have Dark Souls 2. So, Dark Souls 2 is known as the black sheep of the family. So, there are so many aspects that people underrate that I had a hard time choosing one. So ultimately, I landed on art direction for Dark Souls 2. Honestly, man, this game is drop dead gorgeous. I think outside of Bloodborne and Elden Ring, Dark Souls 2 is the third prettiest Souls game. There's so many areas in this game that absolutely take my breath away. Next up, we have Bloodborne. I also had a hard time picking one for Bloodborne 2, but for opposite reasons of Dark Souls 2, the fans glazed this game so much. I had no idea what part of it was underrated, but I ended up finding one. So for Bloodborne, I ended up landing on enemy design. Like, Bloodborne gets a lot of credit for its amazing combat and the trick weapons, but I think the only reason these things are that impressive is because of the impressive mob design. Bloodborne has a wide variety of mobs, and all of them utilize the gameplay Bloodborne perfectly, and I think it's not talked about enough. Starting with Dark Souls 3, I would say the most underrated aspect of Dark Souls 3 is the atmosphere. I have seen people downplay the atmosphere of this game for way too long. This game's atmosphere is amazing. The second best atmosphere between all the FromSoft games. There's so many areas in this game that I just walk into it and I feel the atmosphere instantly. It's just so heavy, so perfect. I love what they did with this game's atmosphere. It's amazing. So we're almost done. Up next we have Sekiro. Now Sekiro was an interesting one because even though it's super popular, it's one of the most popular FromSoft games, the fans don't talk about anything but the boss fights and the combat. And that's kind of sucks because Sekiro has a lot of things that it's really good at. The areas are visually very appealing, it's aesthetically very nice. But what I would pick for the most underrated is the lore. Is it the worst lore FromSoft has ever made? Yes, I think so, but it's still very amazing and deserves to be talked about more. And finally, we're on to Elden Ring. Honestly, the aspect that I find the most underrated in Elden Ring is the reason I even made this video in the first place. I really want to talk about what I find underrated about Elden Ring, and that is the level design. Elden Ring has the best level design in all of From Software history, in my opinion. Elden Ring is not only stunning with its levels, but it's also interconnected like Dark Souls 1. I feel like the Elden Ring level design is everything From Software has learned up until this point put into one game. Not only does Elden Ring have the interconnectivity of Dark Souls 1, but also has the atmosphere of Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. Also, Elden Ring being the biggest Souls game has the most enemy variety. So the Legacy dungeons have a lot of varied enemies that makes them very fun to go through and makes enemies very fun to combat. So I would say that is by far the most under aspect of Elden Ring and one of the best aspects of Elden Ring too.